Today, I want to talk about self love escape velocity, which is an idea I've been writing about for the past couple of weeks because I truly believe that most people actually hate themselves. They don't enjoy the life they're living. It seems dull. They're stuck in region beta, as Chris Williamson would call it. And if you asked them to face the mirror and stare themselves in the eye and say, I love you, they would not be able to. They would break down in tears. They would laugh. They would cringe inside because a part of them would know that the words aren't true. Because when you're not comfortable with where you're at and you feel like your life is fine but not good enough, you feel like your life is not where you want it to be, but not so horrible that you're going to push yourself out of it. You can't believe the words when you say, I love you. You can't believe it when someone tells you you're enough. It feels like a lie because on some level, it is. You avoid, you neglect, you run from your internal discomfort, and you avoid feeling your emotions with full breadth. And it eats away at you from the inside. And your mind keeps track. You may think you can run away from your emotions. You may think you can run away from your thoughts, but you can't. So, why does self love feel so difficult? Why does it feel like it's so out of reach? Why does it feel like it's so difficult to truly accept ourselves for where we are and where we're at? It's hard to be accepting of where you are when you don't like where you're at. When you know there's this massive gap between your ideal self, that potential that you aspire towards, and where you currently are. When that gap is big, self love feels impossible. And it's really tricky. And it's something I've been struggling with for a long time until recently. And that's what I want to dive into today is how I reached this point that I'm calling self-love escape velocity. How I reached this point where my default state of mind wasn't one of self-doubt and self-hatred and negative talk. And I want to start us off with this quote from C.S. Lewis. Love is not affectionate feeling, but a steady wish for the loved person's ultimate good as far as it can be obtained. This applies not just in relationships, romantically, platonically, friendships, whatever. This applies to yourself. Self love is this term that gets thrown around so much. People think of it like treating yourself as if you're a romantic partner, treating yourself as if you're your inner child, and all of those things can be a part of it. But real self love is wishing the best for yourself. And that's not some wishy washy thing. That's a responsibility. That's your duty. You need to take care of yourself as if you're a human responsible for taking care of. Treat yourself like you're some little alien controlling a meat suit and that your responsibility is to keep this human alive. That's how you should think about yourself. What would you wish for that person? What would you wish for them for their life, for their dreams, for their goals? You'd want their ultimate good. And that is what self love is. Now, the first piece of self love, I think, is the hardest part because maybe for some people, they can just love and accept themselves even when they know they're not meeting their full potential. But for me, I had to start proving my worth before I could start believing it. Before I could truly start believing I am enough. Before I could truly start believing I was worthy, I had to unpack everything that I'd been through. I had to go back and find where those patterns had emerged from. And I had to start building evidence with myself. I had to strive towards that potential that I knew I wanted to get to. So the best place to start, I believe, with developing this internal sense of self-love and congruence and alignment is to build evidence. But the issue with that is that it takes a long time. Anything worth doing takes years. Building a physique takes years. Working on your career takes years. Mindfulness and awareness through meditation, journaling, that takes years before you start chipping away at those old patterns, chipping away at that negative self-talk. And evidence only gets you so far. The issue with trying to build evidence and trying to build proof to yourself that you can get things done and that you say who you say you are and that you know your actions and thoughts and emotions are all in alignment, that is great. I love that. But the issue is that it can corrupt. Building evidence can turn into another performance where you're trying to prove to yourself that you can do this, and you're trying to prove to that old inner child that you're enough. And you're not doing it from a place of internal fuel. You're doing it from a place of self-criticism and castigation. You're trying to externally validate yourself. And the issue is that sometimes that works. And this is a trap a lot of people get into that Chris Williamson has talked about a ton on his podcast, Modern Wisdom, where he's talking about this toxic fuel you use to get off the launch pad. And he says, use whatever fuel you've got. And to some extent, I agree. But also, it's toxic for a reason, and you should be trying to switch off of it as quickly as possible. The issue is, I think it may be necessary to some degree. Chasing this evidence, trying to build this proof to yourself, I think you need a little bit of that before you can actually start developing this internal sense of peace and this internal sense of self-love. And I think confidence is the first stage of self-love. Because it might be possible for some people to just love themselves as they are when they're overweight and broke and they feel like they're not even close to where they want to be in life, but they can still love themselves and say, I'm enough. That might be possible for some people, but for me, it was not. For me, when I was insecure, when I was out of shape, when I wasn't able to look at myself in the mirror and truly say, I love you, I didn't feel self-love. I didn't feel any sense of peace. I felt dread. I felt the weight of my avoided emotions bearing down on me constantly. And I wasn't even close to any semblance of confidence or charisma. So I had to start proving my worth before I could start truly believing it. And beyond this stage of confidence, the next step that I think you need to sort of push into is one of surrender and trust. Once you start building evidence with yourself, once you start becoming the sort of person who takes action, who has an internal locus of control, you're developing agency, you're making progress, you can look back over the past 6 months or the past year of your journey and say, wow, I've changed a lot. And you start to build some momentum with yourself. You go, hey, this is fucking sweet. I was there 6 months ago and now I'm here. And if I keep this up, you can see where it's going, right? That's when the confidence starts to build. And that's the evidence collection phase I think is really important. But the second part of it is surrender and trust, because the self-doubt comes back in. And for me, this is where I was 6 months, a year ago. I was improving. I was progressing. I had built up a decent physique 2 years in the gym. I had worked through meditation and journaling for a year or two. I was much more aware. I was much more sociable with other people in my life. I could look back 3 years prior and say, wow, I've made so much progress. But those negative thought patterns and negative loops were still eating away at the back of my mind. That self-doubt was still there. I still had to work through it and push through it and have that mindfulness gap of seeing where that self-doubt was coming from, seeing that self-criticism and going, okay, that's there, but it doesn't have to define me. But it was still a constant battle. And what I realized is that a piece of that will always be there. And you need to surrender to the process and trust in yourself and your ability. You need to trust yourself completely and trust that whatever gets thrown at you, you'll be more than capable of handling it. Trust in whatever force that you believe is guiding you, whether that's God, the universe, any sort of higher power. You don't have to be religious. Something that you believe is an overarching power within your life. And you need to trust in the process. You need to trust that if I'm consistent and if I'm iterating, I will get there. Surrender to that process and let it embody you. Because when you step into that, the bad days are just a part of it. The good days, while great, they're still just a part of it. The process has ebbs and flows, but if the process is moving in a line towards where you want to go, you need to trust in the fact that that line is going to keep continuing to move as long as you continue to show up and put in the work and believe in yourself. And this type of surrender requires so much internal work. This is why I think the evidence building stage is important, because if you don't have that evidence with yourself, it's hard to have even the slightest bit of belief in your capabilities. And when you've done a lot of the internal work, you've done a bunch of meditation, you've done a bunch of journaling, and you've built some evidence behind you so that you know you're the type of person that can stick to your own word, that's when the self-love starts to build. And this is more than just self-love, because this surrender is a complete trust in yourself, but also your potential. It's a congruence between you and your ideal self. It's trusting that you're more than capable to take on anything that gets thrown your way, and you'll still persevere because you have that evidence that you have persevered in the past. And for me, this trust was born from commitment. Sometimes that's a detriment to myself. Sometimes I commit to things for too long. I commit to things when I should quit. I don't take risks soon enough. I stay at the wrong job. I stay in the wrong friendship. I stay doing the wrong hobby, doing the wrong project for too long. But that commitment is also the strength, because I know if I find something and it's truly aligned and I can see where it's going, I am all in, and there's nothing that's going to stop me, because that commitment will not let me. And surrendering to that, that is the power of the trust and the surrender in the process, is because once you have that path lined up for you, once you have that alignment that's giving you that direction, the surrender allows you to fully sink into that process. It allows you to fully trust it and go, hey, it's going to be hard. Sometimes it's going to be great. Sometimes it's going to fucking suck. But I know I'm going to ride this wave and it's going to take me where I want to go. That is what surrender is all about. And it's unnatural for a lot of guys because it feels like you're losing control. It feels like you're giving up the tight grip on the reins that you've had this entire time. That's what gave you your agency. That's what gave you this feeling of accomplishment, right? You were in control and you made shit happen. That is what you were deriving your worth from. You were deriving your worth from going, I did this and this is what happened because of me. And I was in control of it. And that is the power of agency. And that is fantastic. But surrender isn't about giving that up. Surrender actually grows your capacity for agency, because it allows you to let go of the things you were trying to force an outcome over. It allows you to release the uncontrollable, because when you're trying to optimize and trying to figure out all these things that you really have no control over, that is using so much of your mental bandwidth. And when you finally let go of that, it actually gives you more agency and more capacity to take action, because then you can actually focus on the shit that moves the needle, focus on the shit that's actually important, and focus on the shit that you can actually control. This is what Stoicism actually talks about. It's focus on what you can control and don't focus on what you can't. And I think a lot of guys get lost in that when they're trying to take control of their life and becoming more agentic, becoming higher agency and taking more action and getting stuff done. That is one of the core parts of self-improvement, is taking agency, happening to life instead of having life happen to you, pushing yourself out of region beta, pushing yourself towards your goals, pushing yourself, and pushing yourself. And that can cloud your judgment. And then you can forget there are things you will not be able to control. And completely surrendering to those will give you more agency and more control, ironically. It's kind of a paradox, but the greater your surrender to the things you can't control, the greater your trust in the process and the flow of the path that you're on, the more power you have within that path. It's almost as if the surrender and the trust gives you structure, and that structure creates guide rails that you can just go crazy within. And once you set up that path, once you have that structure in place of surrendering and trusting in yourself and the process and the direction of where you're going, that's when the agency can just fly off the walls, because you know where the borders are, you know where the edges, and you can push right up against it. Now, the final part of this is the escape velocity and how you actually feel unstoppable once you reach this point, because the self-love never ends. You're never going to reach a state of bliss where you just have a complete acceptance of yourself at all times, and you're just one and at peace, and you never have to worry about self-doubt. As I said earlier, the self-doubt never goes away. It comes in and it goes away. It comes in ebbs and flows. There's always, especially when you're pushing into a new boundary, a new area, uncertainty is a part of the game. Not only that, the challenges, the struggles, the self-doubt, the uncertainty, that is what makes the process so enjoyable. That is what makes it such a good time. If everything was easy and you knew exactly what was going to happen and there was never anything to push through, there was never a challenge, you would be bored to death. That's essentially the same as being dead. When you have complete certainty over everything, you know everything that's going to happen. Just imagine that for a second. You know everything that's going to happen. You have complete certainty. You know what's coming. You have no doubts about it. And there's no challenge. There's nothing to push through. That is horrible. Suffering and struggle give you the meaning, but beyond that, they are what actually creates the enjoyment. Because that is what we crave. We crave the ability to have some shit thrown at us and for us to deal with it. And then pushing through that challenge, pushing through that hardship, pushing through that struggle, and then coming out the other side, that's where we get our meaning. That's where we get our purpose. And that loop is the process that pushes you forwards into growth and into your potential. So you'll never reach this end state of bliss, and you shouldn't want to anyways. That's not what self-love is about. There's no enlightenment. There's no end point that you reach in anything. But escape velocity is a new shift. It's a signal that you've reached a new stage, right? There's no end point, and it's an ongoing process. But the way you should think about it is there's peaks and there's troughs. And it's like Sisyphus pushing up the mountain. It's not just one mountain that he endlessly goes up forever. That's how a lot of people think about it. The way it actually works in your life is that there's a series of peaks. And as you reach one peak, you can see you're at a new level. You've reached a new stage. But you can see further in the distance, there's another mountain. And that one's a little bit higher. And now the choice is, am I going to climb back down this mountain in order to get up to that next highest peak? Or am I going to stay here? And a lot of people will get stuck because they say, I want to stay here. I worked hard to get here. And that's fair enough. But your ability to achieve greatness and to maximize your potential lies in your determination of being able to go right back down that mountain and start from ground zero. It might not be as low as when you first started, right? You might climb up the mountain and have to go back down maybe 70%. You're not going to go all the way back to where you started because you always have the knowledge and the wisdom and the experience that you gained along the way. So you're never fully resetting to zero. But your willingness to go back down that mountain to climb an even higher one, that is what determines your success. The local maxima, that is what determines your success. Your complete willingness to just start over and try again. And again, you're not starting from zero. Yes, you may be starting over, but it's not like you're completely wiping your progress. You have so much more experience and wisdom you've learned that is going to push you to that new level. This is what self-love escape velocity signals, is that you've reached a new stage. And you're at a stage where the default voices in your head are no longer self-critical. They're no longer weighing you down. They're no longer full of self-doubt and self-hatred and castigation and criticism saying, you're not good enough. You need to show these people what you can do. You're not shit. It's called escape velocity because you've broken orbit. Yes, the self-doubt is still there. Yes, you're going to have uncertain thoughts. Yes, it's not going to be easy the whole time. But at least for me, once I've realized that I've sort of entered this new stage, my default state of being is one of peace. My default internal dialogue is one of forgiveness and acceptance. When I have a challenge that I face, my default instinct is to go, what is this going to teach me? What am I going to learn from it? How am I going to grow through it? That's the initial thought that comes to my head. When I have some sort of self-doubt, my initial thought is, there's that gap between that self-doubt. And instead of pushing against it, I'm like, that's just a part of me. And that is fully okay. It's going to be there. But I know based on my past experience, and I know based on my trust in myself and the process and where I'm going, I'm able to operate with or without I'm able to operate with or without self-doubt. So really it doesn't even matter if it's there. The self-doubt can be there, but I'm going to still win. I'm still going to push myself. I'm still going to improve. I'm still going to progress. So honestly, it has no power anymore. And that's what this escape velocity is about. Your self-talk softens and your default state is optimistic instead of dreadful. And yes, there will be new challenges to the next stage. I know that for sure. Problems are a feature, not a bug of life. And just because I've reached some sort of feeling of escape velocity doesn't mean that it's just smooth sailing from here on out. But it is a little bit easier. This self-awareness and self-compassion builds a bit of love with yourself. And now if I had to look at myself in the mirror and say, I love you, I know I could truly mean it. And that's more than a lot of people can say in a whole lifetime. And I really want a lot of you to get there because once you get to this state, you're going to start to feel unstoppable and you're really going to start to achieve things. You're really going to start to accomplish the things you really want to set out to do because you have that baseline level of trust in yourself. You know, life will beat me down. I'll face challenges. I'll have shit thrown at me, but I'm good because I know I'm the type of person that doesn't quit. I know I'm the type of person that will push through and get shit done no matter the cost. I know I'm the type of person that will be okay because I have that evidence of the past. I have the proof, that little bit of evidence that's given me a bit of confidence that turned into self-love and surrender and trust. You see how it all connects together. You develop this internal sense of self-assuredness, and that's how you become unshakable. Now, I might just be making an early judgment here, but the reason that I felt the need to talk about this in my writings and on this podcast is because this stage of my personal growth just feels different. Sure, it might just be a phase and I'm just feeling extra confident and cocky and peaceful. But I think it's more than that. This feels like a fundamental shift in my default state. And it's persisted over a few weeks now. That's why I don't think this is temporary. That's why I'm calling this an escape velocity, because it feels like there's no going back. It feels like I've broken orbit into a new stage of development. And yes, new levels, new devils. There will be new challenges, and I have yet to discover those. But I've reached the peak of a mountain, and now I'm at a point where it's okay. I can see the trough ahead of me, and I can see the next peak that's a little higher up. And the question I need to ask myself now is, am I willing to go down just to climb again? And the trust and surrender I have in myself in the process is knowing I'm fully willing to do that, and I will. I'll make it up. I made up the last mountain, I'm going to make it up the next one. I know I'm going to have bad days. The climb's going to be difficult. I know I'm going to have bouts of self-doubt. I know sometimes I'm going to feel like quitting. I'm going to be like, why am I doing this? Years, months, whatever, however long it takes, I don't care because I know I'll be able to do it. But the self-love escape velocity that I'm feeling whisked into is because that undercurrent that used to be there is silent. I had bouts of self-belief before I had reached this escape velocity, before I had broken orbit. I had moments where I felt like, yeah, I'm him, dude. I'm the shit. Like, I can do this. I had those moments of belief, especially when someone else would tell me, dude, your content really helped me out. I was going through a rough time and your videos really spoke to me. Those would give me a little surge. They give me a little boost. And I'd feel like, hell yeah, like I'm doing it. I'm on the path. Like I'm making my way there. And then the self-doubt would creep back in because that was what was determining and defining me. The self-doubt had a hold on my identity. And that had been built up over years. So of course it had a hold on me. I was insecure for most of my childhood and adolescence. I didn't feel extremely on the outside. Like I never felt, I felt like a weird kid, but I never felt like so far weird that like I knew I was totally different from everyone else. I think it was bad in a different way because I just felt invisible. I felt like I was right in the middle of the pack, I didn't feel like the black sheep. I felt like the gray sheep. I felt like different enough that I wasn't accepted, different enough that I didn't feel a part of anything, but so similar to everyone else that it didn't even matter. Because I didn't feel accepted, but I also didn't feel belonging. I didn't feel unique or special, but I didn't feel castigated either. And I think that's bad in an entirely different way. Yes, being the outsider, being casted out, feeling so completely alone and cast out and weird, feeling like the black sheep of whatever community or group you're in, especially in high school or sometime when you're developing, that sucks and that's horrible. But for me, being in the middle of the pack and being completely invisible was horrible in a completely different way because I knew if I stayed on that path, I would be invisible the rest of my life. I knew if I just kept doing what everyone else was doing, if I just followed average and followed the autopilot, followed the script everyone had laid out for me, I wouldn't be able to live with myself. But I also knew I wouldn't be able to get out of it because I'd be so beaten down by life by that point that my self-belief would be destroyed. And then that would be the rest of my life. I'd be making excuses and complaining and blaming it on everyone else instead of taking responsibility. And I think that's a really important thing people get confused about with all this victim mindset stuff and taking agency and taking responsibility for things. They confuse responsibility with fault. When someone says, your circumstances are your responsibility, that feels like you're blaming me for things that have happened to me that are outside of my control. But that's not what it's about. Everything that's happened to you up until now, you can't change. That's in the past. And yes, some of those may have been caused by you, some of those may have been caused by others onto you. It doesn't matter though, because that was in the past. Yes, those things may have shaped you. Yes, those things may be difficult and be weighing you down or bogging you down. Maybe you have PTSD, maybe you have trauma, and that is incredibly difficult to work through. And I empathize with that a lot. But you are at the inflection point between where your past was and where your future will be. And everything in your future is your responsibility and is up to you within the confines of your control. You decide what happens. And using the past as an excuse to give up on the future is the best way to kill your potential and kill your own life. If you blame everything else and everyone else for your problems and use that as an excuse for why you aren't getting things that you want and why you aren't becoming the person you want to be and why your life sucks, you have no reason to complain. Excuses and complaints cannot coexist. You can't have excuses and complain about not getting results at the same time. And if you're in that state where life is dull, you're on autopilot, you're stuck in region beta, you're beige, you're sanded down, you're like a Teflon pan that nothing can stick to because you've sanded yourself down so much that you're just a smooth ball with no interesting quirks to grab onto. You're basically dead. You might as well be because you're not alive. If you're in that state, you really need to look at yourself. You need to sit alone, go on a walk without headphones, sit in some silence, push through that discomfort and feel everything that you've been avoiding. Because a lot of what's gotten you to that point is avoiding the things that have happened to you in the past. Avoiding the traumas, avoiding the breakups, avoiding the losses, not working through it and trying to stuff it down and suppress it. Because that suppression and that avoidance will corrupt into self-hatred. Because if you are not accepting and welcoming a part of yourself, you're not loving yourself. The negative emotions are a part of you, just as much as the positive emotions are. Everything that happens internally in the mind is a part of you. And if you're trying to resist that or avoid that, you're telling yourself, I don't love you. I hate you. Get out of my way. Get out. Go. That's what you're saying to yourself. And you may not think that's the case. You may think, yeah, but like negative emotions, I just don't want to feel them. They feel sucky. And that's fair. They do feel horrible. That's why this message is so difficult to get across, because it's painful. It hurts so much. Working through all of this, letting yourself feel all the negative emotions is so difficult. But I can speak from personal experience to tell you that when you push through it, when you let everything flow through you and you stop trying to block anything, whether it's anger or sadness or shame or regret, when you let yourself feel that and fully welcome that as a part of yourself, that is when real self-love can start to build. Once you reach this level of escape velocity, you reach this peak that so many people are trying to get to, where they feel a default state of being more optimistic and being more in love and accepting of themselves. You will feel unstoppable because you have that foundational layer that says, I'm good. I'm enough. That's it. There's no baseline feeling of insufficiency. And that's what was there for me for the longest time, is I had this baseline feeling that I wasn't enough. And it can be called productivity dysmorphia or self-worth debt. You wake up feeling like you're already behind and that you need to have your day go perfectly just for you to feel like you were just barely passing. And that feeling is fueled from old patterns of insecurity, old voices of maybe kids that bullied you in school, or maybe your own self bullying you, not welcoming parts of yourself, avoiding the emotions that you were feeling about those things that happened to you. Again, your past is not your responsibility, but your future is. Your past isn't your fault. Some of it may have been, but largely it doesn't matter because that is the past. You're at the inflection point now. And if you reach this level where your default state is one of peace and acceptance, and I truly wish for you to get there. It's going to be difficult. I promise you that. It will be difficult to get to this point. It was for me. But once you do get there, there truly is nothing stopping you. And you won't just feel unstoppable. You will be unstoppable. I don't just feel unstoppable anymore. I know I'm unstoppable. My goals are not aspirations. I have huge dreams. They're benchmarks. I will reach them. And that will just be a new stage. That's a new peak. Because I know as soon as I get off this peak, climb back up the mountain to the next highest peak, there will be another peak and another peak. But that is the game. The game is asking yourself, how far do I want to climb? And am I willing to go to that point? Because when your goals are completely aligned with your values, your actions, your thoughts, your heart, that is when it clicks. And I think that is the inflection point that triggers you into this self-love escape velocity. That's the point where you stop worrying about if you're going to make it. You act as if you already are going to make it. Instead of pushing yourself and working through all this stuff and working so hard, worried about what if it doesn't happen, think what if it does? And beyond that, act as if it will. How would you act if you knew it was going to happen? If you knew it was going to work out? What are the steps you would take if you had 100% certainty that all of your goals that you currently have right now, because you'll set new goals in the future, that all of your goals were going to happen for certain? What would be the steps you would take to get there? Because that's what's actually happening right now. Everything you're doing is compounding into your future. So if you say, okay, I know my goals are going to happen, they're inevitable. What would be the necessary steps to get to that point? And then just do them. Surrender to those steps. Surrender to the process of getting towards those goals. Because that's how you'll actually get them. Because if your goal was inevitable the whole time, would you rather enjoy the process and enjoy the challenges and enjoy the struggles and have the time of your life while you're getting there and love every second of it? Or would you rather be full of self-doubt, full of insufficiency and uncertainty, constantly second guessing whether you should quit, whether you should leave, whether it's all worth it? Would you rather do that the whole time? I fucking doubt it. If the goal was inevitable, how would you want to act on the way to get there? That's the question you need to ask yourself. And once you develop some evidence with yourself, once you work through a lot of self-love and realizing that your future is your responsibility and your past is just the past, and you're at the inflection point between those two. Once you surrender and trust in yourself and the process that you know you're capable of taking on whatever gets thrown at you, and you know you'll get to the points you want to get to. Once all of that comes together, you're unstoppable. And your goals are just a benchmark. And that's how you get to that next peak. Love is not an affectionate feeling. It's a wish for yourself and a wish for the person's good as far as it can be obtained. And self-love is about wishing the best for yourself, no matter what. Even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Even when it's difficult and you want to quit, especially when it's difficult and you want to quit. That's how you become unstoppable, and that's how you become unbreakable. Thank you for listening today. I really enjoyed diving into this and just opening up about where I've been at, what I've been writing about, what I've been working towards. Like, I'm going to be writing a longer piece issue on this because I think it's really important. I think it's a big key to the puzzle that a lot of people are missing, is because they forget and they think they need to push themselves and they think they need to do all these things. And to some extent that is true in to a degree. But the biggest misunderstanding people have is that self-love and enjoying the process is the most productive strategy to get your goals accomplished, because it maximizes your current enjoyment and it maximizes your future potential. Because yeah, you can force yourself the whole way there. You can be miserable. You might be successful. You probably will be. But would you rather be successful and happy and at peace? Or would you rather be successful and miserable and hate yourself? I think that's the real question you need to ask yourself. And that's most people don't think about that. They're so wrapped up in this success that they just forget to forgive themselves and love themselves a little bit. They forget to give themselves grace. Thank you for listening. I'll see you in the next one.